Hi everybody, good morning. I don't know if you saw my post yesterday, but I was giving 2 quotes for my Tantra of Christ workshop that's happening this Friday. And one was from the Gospel of John, and the other was from a book that I love called Tantra Illuminated by Christopher Harish Wallace. And I wanted to speak today a little bit about the quote that I put from the Gospel of John. It starts out, "Remain in me." It's chapter 15, so let me read some of that passage to you. "Whoever remains in me and I in them will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. Remain in my love." You might wonder why I'm choosing this for a Tantra of Christ workshop. The essence of it speaks really strongly to me, and I'd love to draw upon a friend of mine, of a Carmelite, like I was Carmelite, Elizabeth of the Trinity. And when she read this passage, it spoke to her so much about herself as the dwelling place for the divine, for God. She even mentioned that she loved her name Elizabeth, which meant house of God. And the passage to her had this nuance and sophistication to it. Remain in me. Not just for a moment, not just for a day that passes, but remain in me every moment of every day. Work in me, live in me, play in me, laugh in me, be confused in me, celebrate in me, release sadness in me. Be breathed in the very breath at the center of your being. And that, of course, is my own line coming at the end there. And what could this possibly mean when we consider Tantra, especially the worldview of Tantra that I ascribe to as non-dual? It means that at the very center of who and what we are, it's there we find ourselves embraced. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like a paradox. Because at center, you feel like you're coming down to a very narrow point. It's small, and you can direct a gaze to it. So how could the very point, the very pulse of your being and my being be the very embrace itself? And I would say because that pulse is the breath of spirit. And so narrowing into it opens us up to the potential of remaining, abiding, living in that presence, and finding ourselves, even as we live more and more in that presence, that too dissolves away, and we find ourselves as the presence, incrementally, slowly, more stably. And that very pulse and that very presence can come into every part of our lives. It's very easy to open to this remaining when it tastes good, when it feels good, when it's not uncomfortable. But ultimately, that remaining is intended to take us into the scary places of ourselves, the uncertain places of ourselves, the place where love hasn't quite reached yet, and fear is running the ship. I can remember a time when I was 19 and I was living in Santa Cruz, California. And I was working at a shelter for homeless, and it was an awesome shelter because we had lots of resources. So when people were staying with us, if they wanted, we could provide education for them. We could provide in a more stable way for their needs if they needed counseling. We had a lot at our disposal. The shelter was loved by the community. And if you were going to join the shelter, you had to make a commitment to your personal growth and a commitment to the community, which was a big thing, especially in Santa Cruz at that time. Many of the people that joined us were either struggling with drugs or had struggled in the past. Well, I was only 19, and I loved working there, and I was very close friends with everyone that was part of the volunteer staff. And I was asked to manage one of the nights. And it hit a place of fear in me. I wonder, could I do this? I'm so much younger than everybody else. And how would I be of service? I have no familiarity with people recovering from addictions, especially something as debilitating as things like heroin and cocaine. And I was scared. And I was also a little scared because I wondered, what's going to happen when I draw close to everyone? How will I do? Will I remain strong? Will I be capable of loving the way that I want to love? And I can remember the distinct moment. I was standing there in the kitchen after having been asked, and I had a moment by myself, but there was a sea of volunteers and of all the people that were staying with us in the background. And I had this very contemplative moment that brought me into that remaining, that pulse at my center, where God or the divine, where I experienced the self, capital S. And in the very moment in that fear, everything turned kind of like an etheric white, though I could see everyone. And the presence of Christ stood before me. And I could feel the message. There was a knowing without words that this person in history drew close to everyone. And it was in the very movement of compassion itself. It was in the very movement of service and love itself, in the drawing close, that was the vehicle for the inner stability. It was the experience of the divine within. Remain in me, not just for a moment, not just for a day that passes, not just when it feels good, not just when it feels bad, not just when you're scared, not just when you're happy, but abide, abide. And in the abiding, I have always found therein lies effortlessly the insight, the freedom that we long for, the freedom to be utterly emotionally responsible in every intimate choice, in every friendship, in every choice for our work, in every choice for how we spend our time. Because everything we do is really about intimacy and freedom. Another paradox, drawing narrowly to the center expands us into the universal embrace. Drawing close in connection brings us into the place of true freedom. So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I want to invite you, if you live in the Denver-Boulder area, to show up Friday night. We're going to have a lot of fun at this Tantra of Christ workshop. We're going to take texts like this and really reflect them from within through some practices, some puja exercises. We're going to parallel them with some of my favorite texts of non-dual Shaiva Tantra, and I am by no means an expert in that lineage and that tradition, but I have found for the past 11 years that every time I read any of those sutras, it speaks in a penetrating way to my own mystical experience. So we're going to lay those side by side. I'm going to take specific passages attributed to Jesus and see if we can probe them in a new way. So I want you to bring your wisdom and your insight and your quandaries and your celebrations and your breakthroughs and your breakaways. So today with me, let's remain. Let's remain, and let's remember that it's quite possible to let go of what might hesitate or limit the embrace that we're meant to walk in. And remember, this embrace is not just passive. It's not just about laying down in a comfy pillow and couch. The embrace ignites us. It sets us in motion. It creates new movement and creativity. And it does so from the place of greatest intimacy, that is you, with your highest self and with the eternal, the ineffable, and what I like to call spirit. So blessings, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I love you. Mwah.